for joining us today. We're excited to talk about early book sharing strategies. Um, and we have a few objectives. We're hoping to cover the benefits of early book sharing and book reading for child development and early relationships, the actual book sharing strategies for engaging young children in book time, visual supports and behavioral strategies to help with that, and considerations for choosing different books for different ages and developmental levels. And we would love to know a little bit about our audience if you guys can. So it sounds like Jacob and Aaron, are you working with groups of kids? Are you working one-on-one with kids? What does that typically look like? Or are you teaching families strategies?
Feel like I may be the only person here not connected to the group. I actually work with like transition age and adults
Oh, okay.
um in an employment program. So I'm kind of in this series to just gather a little bit more information
Yeah, learn about
about
a variety of topics. Yeah,
exactly.
love it. Okay. Well, that's great. I'll try and tailor a little bit today and be kind of broad in my different presentation material that we give you guys, so that people who are watching this later can benefit from it too. So, but thank you for telling the group about yourself. Um, okay. I'm going to hand it off to Brenda to talk about benefits of early book sharing and book reading.
Sure. Hi, everyone. We're excited to talk about some of the benefits and strategies for shared book reading. To start us off, we really wanted to think about walking through what we know about how early book sharing benefits development. So we know that early exposure to book reading, or what we're called shared reading for young kids, is linked to really important learning opportunities and key child outcomes. When we think about that early learning environment for young children, it's all of the ways that they're experiencing supportive and really language rich interactions with the caregivers in their lives during their daily routines. And it's that back and forth in conversation between a child and their caregiver that's happening even before a child has words. So when a caregiver is talking to a child and the child's looking at them or moving, that's part of the conversation. And that is really supporting early brain development, and it's a protective factor for young children. In particular, it supports third grade reading proficiency and school readiness, and it's even linked to longer term outcomes like success in school, graduating from school, and health outcomes as well. And book sharing is supporting not just language development, but other areas. So it's supporting social emotional development, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. It's creating an opportunity for a social interaction between a child and caregiver. It's also helping to support early attention development. So even briefly focusing on pictures in a book is supporting that attention and really higher level executive functioning later in life. And all of these areas are really foundational for school readiness and later success in life for children. We also have a lot of information about how book sharing is creating a very rich opportunity for learning. It's a very effective vehicle, and research has shown that compared to other kind of daily routines that children and caregivers have, book sharing creates predictable opportunities for learning. It's it's making it more likely for caregivers to do things like label objects, have those conversational back and forths, to create an opportunity for joint attention or sharing attention to the same thing, which is really important for learning and development. And book sharing also elicits more rich vocabulary and a more diverse vocabulary compared to other daily routines. So those language-rich interactions are important throughout a child's day, but book sharing is an especially powerful way of creating those opportunities. But we know also that while the frequency and quality of shared reading is a predictor of those important early developmental outcomes, there are differences in the opportunities that children have. So, less than 50% of caregivers are providing those regular shared reading opportunities for children 5 and under. And we know as many as 1 in 5 children do not in their own home have access to books. So those are some important barriers to keep in mind when we're thinking about creating access and opportunity for families. The reason that we're focusing on shared reading in this talk is because we know that this is a very powerful and preventative way to support development. All of the opportunities, even looking at a book briefly, which we'll talk about, is really providing a learning opportunity for children. And the exposure to books is creating a much larger a vocabulary that children are exposed to in their day-to-day life. So it's a really powerful vehicle. We also want to think about it's never too early to start with shared reading. And a child's age or differences in their developmental level are not barriers to still providing those same high quality shared reading opportunities. It may look different, but we're still able to create that same learning potential by sharing books together. And we actually have a lot of research about the kinds of strategies that are helpful for children and caregivers during shared reading, which is what we're going to talk about in just a moment. Understanding kind of those differences in what book sharing can look like can help us feel less frustrated as caregivers and as parents trying to create those opportunities for children. I've been using the term book sharing, and I wanted to take a minute to talk about how that's different than book reading for young children. We use that term because book sharing is about not focusing on reading the words on the page, but doing things like talking about the pictures, asking questions about the pictures, and really focusing on creating a fun opportunity with the books so that looking at books together is fun and rewarding. And it's also an opportunity for caregivers to become closer to support that early relationship. Book sharing is really a way to support that serve and return, that back and forth in creating a strong relationship. That back and forth helps a child feel that they are seen and heard in the relationship, that they're valued by their caregiver, and it's supporting that secure attachment relationship. Um, Shared reading is really supporting emotional development as well. So, being focused on the same object is an opportunity for that emotional synchrony that we know can support development. We can use the book as a way to talk about emotions and really validating a child's emotions as well. Shared reading is an opportunity for really creating a positive routine. It's a predictable way for a caregiver and a child to have an interaction during a busy daily routine, to have a few moments for shared reading. And that routine creates that safety and sense of security that's important for child development as well. It's also a way for caregivers to be mindful of taking a moment away from a busy routine and really focusing on a book together. And then shared reading is an opportunity for that physical closeness that we know can even do things like release those hormones like oxytocin that boost a relationship, and it promotes that trust and connection between a caregiver and a child. Okay. I think we want to step into now some of those strategies that we talk about. Um, we sometimes show some pictures at the start that can um, uh, illustrate how it can sometimes feel when we are thinking about looking at books with young children. It can be sometimes, it can sometimes feel stressful or like it's not going the way that we would expect. Sometimes children are doing things like chewing on the books, and that may not be what we think we want to happen during shared reading. But really, all of these interactions are an opportunity for bonding and supporting development. But we do know that there are some things that we want to keep in mind about the developmental progression of shared reading across ages. So this slide kind of illustrates that shift that happens from infancy across the early years into toddlerhood and then later on in later childhood, where we start with the adult really fully and completely leading that interaction and noticing and tuning into the changes and how a child is paying attention. And then gradually across toddlerhood, children are becoming more and more in charge of and leading that interaction as they're doing things like pointing to book pictures in the book or labeling the pictures. So this is uh, kind of illustrating the importance of kind of being attuned to a child's developmental level in terms of how much we are leading or able to allow a child to lead that experience. And then I think we want to shift into some things to think about in terms of setting up those shared reading routines.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we've kind of talked about reasons to book share and what to expect as those skills are developing, let's just go ahead and cover some of those recommendations on when and how to book share so we can do that successfully. First, important to think about when to share books so that it's positive. It's a positive experience for everyone. It's great to share books when it's quiet so that the child won't be distracted. When you aren't busy so that you can give all of your attention to the child. When the child wants to, when the child has kind of all their basic needs met as far as not being too tired or too hungry or things like that. And it can really help to establish a regular time for book sharing so that there can be a routine around it, like we've been suggesting. Um, One of the first things that we try to talk about with families when they're sharing books is to try and follow the child's lead and give the child freedom with the book. Um, so, biting the book, nobody's favorite when parents are thinking about the investment that they've put into to their books. Um, we understand that, but we try not to make a huge deal out of this. When really small children are biting or mouthing books, it's just a way that they're kind of exploring some things, pretty natural. And if you choose a board book for your book sharing, it won't be feeling like quite as big of a deal. And after a moment or two, you can try and redirect gently by saying something like, "Oh, let's look inside the book," or "Oh, let's look at the pictures now." Um, we also encourage families to or caregivers to have the kids hold the book if the child is interested in that. It's okay if it's upside down or if they're going backwards. We want children to enjoy holding and interacting with the books. So letting them hold it, and then you know what, if they drop it, it's a great time to demonstrate holding it, with the front cover facing. Um, but try not to correct them with that if you can. Um, Turning the pages can be a great way to get kids involved. They can help you turn the pages. You might even like put your finger at the top of a board book page to kind of help get their finger in and get the page turn started. And then going backwards is totally okay. A kid might decide to begin with the end or, flip to the middle, and that's totally fine. We're just trying to follow their lead and comment and use some of the skills that we're going to cover in more detail in a second here. Um, The next tip is to talk about what interests the child. So we're going to try and tune into what we think they're looking at. And if they kind of point to or pat the picture, taking a moment to talk about what it seems like has maybe attracted their interest. They pat the puppy. Oh, you see the puppy sleeping. Snore, snore. He's sleeping. Shh. So just noticing what they're tuning into and making sure that you're talking about that. The next one is to use a lively voice, and this is a really fun one, trying to have a melodic tone, matching the emotions. It really helps kids stay interested in books. You might even hear a child trying to repeat a funny noise that you make when you're using a lively voice, um, which is super fun. And actually, using that kind of expressive, lively voice can help children learn the meanings of new words. We want to say we know it might feel a little bit silly at first to use a lively voice or read in an exaggerated voice, but kids usually really love it, and it can make the time a lot more fun. And it lets them see that we're enjoying the experience and the book sharing. And it's also a great tip for if they're looking like they're kind of drifting off with their attention, that you can use a lively voice or an exaggerated voice, and sometimes that'll get their attention back to the interaction, which is great. I think we actually have a video here, so I'll go ahead and play this, and please let me know if you can't. Oh, if you can't hear it. No, not hearing it. Okay. Oops. Let me adjust my share to see if I can share. Okay. Sorry about that. I think they have changed the way this looks on Zoom. So we'll share sound.
And does she look happy? That's a happy monkey. The other one was sad. But these ones are happy. He looks so sad.
All right, did that work okay? Okay. I think I've lost my ability to see the rest of you. So if you can tell me verbally if it worked, that'd be
Works.
great.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks.
It worked.
Sorry about that.
So, in that video there, this mom's doing a great job of using a lively voice and acting out some feelings. And talking about the feelings in this way not only makes the use of the lively voice strategy, but it can boost this kiddo's social emotional understanding and lets them learn about different feelings in a safe context of a book sharing interaction. So, a great reason to do lively voice with kids. Um, Pointing and naming is our next skill. So this one's pretty simple. I bet you've tried it out before. But pointing and naming something that you're seeing in the book. So if the child that you're working with is looking at this child's fingers, then you would point to the fingers and say, "Fingers, you see that child's fingers." Or if you think that the child that you're looking at books with is looking at what the babies are doing in the picture, you can talk about that. So, oh, running, these babies are running. Another great strategy is pausing for response. This allows time for the child to respond and can help kind of initiate the back and forth of a conversation. And it's great not just after questions, but even just after pointing and labeling too. It gives them time to kind of jump in and repeat a word, try it out, or make their own observations and comments too. And it feels a lot harder than it sounds. So sometimes some of our families will kind of count in their heads to three after they say something to like help them wait long enough, just as an example. Repeating is our next strategy. if a child uses a sound, we're going to encourage you to imitate it. If they try to use a word, then repeat it. So in this case, we've got Spot in the bathtub, and if the child points and says doggy or says duh, then we're going to say something like, yes, that's right, that is a doggy. So doggy, duh. So repeating that shows the child that you were listening and that those sounds that they're making are really meaningful. And it helps teach them that when they use their sounds or their words or their tries at words, it gets our attention and it gets a reaction. So it encourages more use of language on their part. So here's another video of the repeating.
Yeah? Where's the truck? Where's the truck? It's green. That's the truck. That's right. That's right. You did a good job. Ball. Yeah, ball.
Mhm. All right. And you hear the mom's repeating her son's words. When he says truck, she immediately responds with, that's right, that's a truck, good job. And when he points and says, bah, she says, yeah, ball. Notice too that her voice is animated enough to re-engage him in the story. And she's also praising him during the interaction as well. And she's continuing to follow his lead and let him kind of explore the book at his own pace and comfort level. You notice he's standing and kind of moving around too, and that's sometimes what it looks like, and that's okay. This one's a great example of how many strategies can be layered in all at once. The next one is elaborating. So this is where we will add more information to what the child has already attended to. So you can expand on what they verbally comment on or point to or look at or vocalize. And this is just, giving him a little bit more giving him or her a little bit more information. We can think about the words that the child knows and add more information. For each picture, we can actually think about a variety of different things that we can comment on. So an example of an elaboration here might be if the child says boy, and then we might say, yes, that boy is running, but we could easily kind of comment on something else and say, yes, that boy is at the beach, or that boy is smiling. He looks happy. So talking about the features, the emotions, the places, the actions, or related items are all great ways to kind of expand on what the child initially communicated about when we're looking at books. Uh, the next idea is making links. And we can do this in a few different ways. We can link to right now, we can link to actions, we can link to the child's life, or to experiences. And by linking the words and the pictures from the book to the child's everyday experiences, you're helping make those words in the book and the pictures in the book more meaningful for them. So making links to right now might sound like pointing at the character's shirt in the book and saying the boy's shirt, and then pointing at your child's shirt or a child's shirt and saying your shirt. Or then you could also point to your shirt and say my shirt. So you can link to something that the child can see right now in the real world, whether it's clothing or shoes or body parts or objects or different things. And so there are also ways to link to actions, so you can act out actually what's happening in the book. And this is a great one too if you're getting a kiddo whose attention is wandering. So when you see actions in the book, you can act them out with the child. Like if the child in the book is falling down, you guys can pretend to fall down, and then it's super fun and engaging. If the child in the book is sleeping, then you can pretend to sleep, and you can just really have a fun time with it. In this picture, this kiddo has, I think, some soup or maybe some Jello. I think it's soup, but we can say something like, "Yum, he's eating. Let's eat some too. I'm going to use my spoon." Stuff like that, to make it really fun and engaging for the child. Asking questions is another strategy, and I think Brenda was going to hop in and talk about this one.
Yes. So with questions, there's lots of ways that we can use this to enrich shared reading. But we really want to think about using questions strategically, especially for young children or for children who might have delays in their language development. So for young children, we want to think about just asking a few questions. because too many questions can get overwhelming when they don't have a way to respond. And it can be a really quick way to lose a child's interest when we pepper them with too many questions. So we want to think about questions that relate to objects or actions or things that we know a child understands because we want them to be successful when we're asking questions. So, some typical things that young children would often be able to understand could be thinking about routines. So, things like bedtime or eating or dressing, focusing questions around those things when they show up in books. And we can also think about who or where or what questions so that children can be thinking and noticing what's happening in a book as well. But a good strategy is always to think about questions related to pictures that a child likes a lot because they're going to be engaged with those pictures and those questions. We talked about the importance of pausing earlier, and pausing is really important with questions. When we ask a question, we always want to give a child a chance to respond. And even if a child doesn't respond, the pause lets them know that they're a part of that back and forth, that they're part of the conversation, and it helps them learn about how communication works. So it's really important, even when children don't always um, respond or have a response just yet. So if a child isn't responding, we want to give them those beats, so that 1, 2, 3, or even 4 seconds, and then we can respond for them. But again, only after a child has given the opportunity to respond. We can think about starting with questions, as we said, that children are interested in, the pictures they're interested in, and what they're focused on. So in this example, we could ask a where question, like, where's the mouse? And pause for the child to look at the picture or point to the picture or use a sound. And then we can answer that question if a child doesn't have a response with something like, oh, the mouse is looking at the book, and point to the mouse. We want to use language that's at a child's level of development. For this picture, we could ask a question like, what is the boy doing? Um, and sometimes it can feel like a long wait while we're waiting for that response. But again, we're just looking for any cue from the child that they're engaged or thinking about the picture. And if a child is responding or not responding, we still want to offer lots of praise and encouragement for looking at the book, using that lively voice we talked about to let them know that we're still engaged with the reading with them. And we can ask the same questions, different questions with the pictures. Um, Sometimes that routine of asking the same question when you come into a favorite picture in a book can be a really fun strategy for a child. We know that routine and that repetition is a good thing, and it helps keep that interest and that engagement. So this is a quick video that we'll take a look together, and then we can talk about, pay attention to how she is using that pausing that we talked about.
I see a,
Butterfly.
yeah, like so high. I see a
Oh,
frog. What's he say?
rabbit.
Ribbit. I see a
Airplane.
airplane. What do they do? What do airplanes do?
Go fly in the sky.
Fly in the sky.
So that was a great example of asking questions and pausing, letting the child fill in the sentences, and also to answer questions there. And he was responding to her questions, but even if he hadn't, she could provide a response, and keep going with that interaction. She was doing a nice job of pacing and giving him time to process those questions, think about the answers. So as a child gains more language skills and gets a bit older, we can work in more difficult questions. We don't want it to be a quiz, we still want it to be fun. But more difficult questions would be things like why and how. And if you're asking these questions and children don't have the answers, that's okay. You can help them with the answers. So we might ask a question like, why is the doggy wet? And then if the child isn't sure, we could say, oh, he jumped in the bathtub with the baby. That's silly. Again, the more that we can make the questions and the reading together fun, the more engaging it's going to be for a child. So for this picture, we might ask a question like, why is the boy brushing his teeth? And then we could say, yes, it must be time for him to go to sleep. Um, we can work in those difficult questions with lots of easy ones that we know children can answer so that we're keeping it positive and engaging for them. Um, Questions can be a really important strategy for supporting language development, but again, we want to keep in mind using them strategically and not asking too many questions to overwhelm a child, and keeping an eye on things that they're understanding. So I think we have one more video to watch together, and this one has several of the skills that we've talked about. So we can take a look and then talk about what we spotted in there.
Cars, stroller. Cars, stroller, yeah. Look, what is he feeling? Are they having fun and happy, or are they sad? Happy. Yeah, let me see your happy face. Yeah, happy face. Uh-oh, what happened? Yeah. Why are they sad? Is it time to say goodbye? Yeah. And then, oh, got work to do. What's he doing? Yeah, he's cleaning up. You help clean up toys every night? Yeah. Yeah. You do a good job. Your turn. Turn the page. Oh. Yeah. What's that? Banana. A banana? Yeah. Oh.
So feel free to come off on mute and off of mute or drop in the chat any skills that you saw there. I think we saw a bunch.
There was the pausing and allowing the time to respond. There was asking questions like, what is this doing? What is he working on? Is he cleaning?
Perfect.
That's
Yeah,
great. I also love how this mom linked to real life about like a routine that they do. She was like, you help clean up every night. I think she said something like that. So I thought that was cool.
And then also having him show her like there's a happy face or show me a happy face. So having him uh, show her what it looks like.
Yeah, talking about those feelings. Absolutely. She was praising him along the way and keeping that lively voice going. So, yes, and you guys were all spotting all of the good things. So, that's a great example of how all of those different strategies can be used really throughout an interaction. And I think one of the main kind of takeaways for us that we always want to emphasize is keeping that reading together fun. Even if it's very short, we still want to keep that interaction positive and engaging. And when a child isn't having fun, we can think about for ourselves, or we can encourage caregivers to think about just some checks. Am I following the child's lead? Sometimes that can be a good reset. Is this a good time of day? There may be a better time to pull out the books during our daily routine to have some shared reading time together? Another check can be kind of thinking about where our attention is, if we're fully present as the caregiver, and then thinking about where our enjoyment is of the book. If we're having fun looking at a book together, it's much more likely that the child is going to as well. So I think we want to shift and talk about some other strategies when
Mhm.
kind of just support behavior during that time together.
Absolutely. So we know that sometimes the book sharing or interactions around books can be feeling a little bit tricky for some kids and caregivers. Kids who, are typically developing, or kids with developmental differences, kids who have just come into a home or have, been there their whole lives. Some kids might just not be used to that routine of book sharing or that type of interaction. Some might see it as like work or something like that. Some of them might have a shorter attention span. And so these are just some ideas of some additional supports that might help things go a little bit more smoothly when you're doing book sharing. First one I wanted to cover would be kind of physical factors. So, um, one thing would be to think about how can I minimize distractions or background noise? By doing that, you're making the interaction around books the most attractive and interesting thing around. So maybe we're making sure that we're turning off background music or screens if there are screens in the room. Maybe we're covering up toys with a blanket during this time, and we're getting comfy. Making sure that the kid or kids are comfortable. Um, do they need a cushion or a blanket or a yoga mat under them? Is it a comfortable temperature? And, do they need to sit or stand or lay down or do a combination of those things? Whatever we can do to just get comfy and be able to do our book sharing time. Um, Another one, if you're not yet familiar, visual schedules can be supportive for this. They really show kids the sequence of events with a set of pictures. And so the way that you would use it is you would go over the visual schedule at the beginning of the book sharing time with really simple language, and then point to it at each kind of transition point as you talk about it. Oh, we're getting comfy on the rug. Next, we're going to start book time. And then, oh, we're done with book time. Now we're going to do snack or whatever is happening next. An even simpler version of this would be what we call a first then visual. These are great for really young kids or kids with developmental differences. And it's just a simple, first we're doing books, then we're doing snack time. Just has two pictures and keeps it nice and simple for our kiddos. Um, Physical factors, sensory accommodations are things to think about. Some young children or children with developmental differences need to move a little bit more, and that's okay. We can expect it and try not to take it personally. um, Movement breaks can be naturally added in the context of the interaction and the activity. You can do some of that acting out together. You could also do little breaks that are designed for that, like a shake your sillies out kind of break, or put one of those in the middle of your book sharing time. If you are doing this with a kid who really likes to kind of wiggle around, you can try one of these like wiggle seats. Or if they like to have something in their hands or they benefit from having something like on their lap, they might like to have like a big blanket or kind of a chunky kind of bean bag to feel in their hands and have on their lap too. Can just help people regulate a little bit better and be more available for some of these interactions. There are a few different activity factors I wanted to go over. One would be enthusiasm, just trying to get excited and be enthusiastic about sharing books. Like Dr. Sally was saying, having fun with it. It's going to be contagious. When it's possible to give choices, we would encourage you to do that. They help everybody feel kind of more in control and feel like they're having a better time. Do you want to sit or stand? And if you're one-on-one with someone, oh, which book should we do? Providing lots of opportunities to respond or participate or help with all those different strategies that we talked about. Trying to give labeled or specific praise. I think we saw some examples of that in our videos, but it sounds like telling kids exactly what they're doing that you like. We know that that's a really powerful way to praise kids. You can keep it still really short. You can say things like good listening or nice job looking at the book or thanks for turning the page. And those are all examples of specific label praise. Um, some of our kids with autism and even just some children who have strong interests might benefit from you throwing in some books that include their strong interests. So let's say we have somebody who's really into trains. We can read some books about trains, and maybe that helps us get into this book sharing routine. Or, maybe if we're using like a visual schedule or a first then board, we can even put pictures of the train on that, or have a little choo-choo dance over to the book sharing area where we do the routine every day. So we can try and incorporate the things that they like. Just in case people are doing group book sharing, there are some things you can think about in this area too, to support the engagement. One would be to define the space. So maybe that's a rug, maybe it's a blanket, maybe it's a taped off area on the floor. You can consider like zones, even if you have multiple kids. Maybe like this is our sitting zone and this is our standing zone. This is our laying zone. You can try that visual schedule for the whole group, keeping in mind different sensory factors too. Things like, is there an echo in this room where we're doing this? Are there a lot of kids and a lot of noise? We can think about making sure that there are carpets around to kind of dampen sound, sort of playing with how we're seating different kids that might need to be like closer to the action or maybe on the edge of the group so that they're not in the thick of, so much activity or noise. Sometimes you can experiment a little bit with headphones or earmuffs to make people feel more comfortable if they're seeming bothered by the level of noise. Um, and then there are some accessibility factors I would want people to think about too if they're going to do group book sharing. So thinking about our kids with hearing impairment, making sure that they're in a spot where they'll be able to hear the speaker or the main person who's talking or interacting. Um, and maybe making sure that they're seated so that like if there's a good ear that ear is closer to that person. And then thinking about people with vision differences, do we need to also sit them closer or do we need them to have a copy of their own book or do we need to use a large format book so that it's really visible to everybody in the room? So those are just some things to kind of think about um, if we're going to share books with groups. We get lots of questions about how to choose books and what we look for in books, and we have a whole handout about this too, but I'll just kind of hit on a couple of high points here. We want to choose books for book sharing that encourage a back and forth interaction. We want to choose ones that can be reusable and that we can use them over and over again as we're getting into our routine. We want to choose books that have opportunities to use the different book sharing strategies. Um, and we want to choose books that are appealing, of course, to the child and to the adults involved in the interaction. That really helps encourage more frequent interaction and encourages participation too. Some other thoughts, like I said, the handout has lots of things to consider, but these are some of my favorite things on there to sort of highlight. Um, Durability, you'll want to consider the child's motor abilities, tendency for mouthing, and sort of your comfort level when choosing the type of book to get. Purchasing books we know can be expensive and you probably want them to last, or maybe you're borrowing books from the library. So thinking about which types of books you would want. For kids who are mouthing objects or like to kind of tear or crinkle paper, a board book can be great. Or there are those like unrippable books too, so you can look at those or fabric books. Um, and as kids learn not to tear pages of the book, hardcover or paperback books can be introduced. The length of the book, it's okay that there are books of different lengths and it's okay to book share with lots of different lengths of books. Thinking about getting through, the pages that the child is interested in. That's what we really want to do. Even if we only spend, we only do one page, but we're having a huge, conversation about different things on the page, or interacting in multiple ways over that one illustration. That's totally fine. If it's a longer book, then they can pick other pages to explore each time that they read the book, or share the book with you. Um, and don't worry, as their attention increases, you're going to get through more and more of the book during book sharing time. With images, sometimes people ask, should I go more simple? Should I go more complex? It's really just finding books with images and colors that appeal to the child and the adult involved in the interaction. If those are images that are attractive to both of you, that's going to be great. 2 thumbs up. It's going to encourage more frequent book sharing. So complex images or simple images, it's really what's appealing to you all. With language, I would encourage you to explore rhyming books, even at a really early age. For kids who are babbling or just saying their first words, just hearing the rhyme scheme repeatedly helps prime them to learn rhyming as their language develops. And you can try out pausing before the word that rhymes, just to give them time to think about it. Even if you know they're not going to respond or they're not going to make a sound, that's okay. We're still practicing that pausing. Um, for children who are speaking in single words, again, you can do that same sort of pause. And we know that exposing them to lots of different rhyming words can help them sort of learn that skill. And then you can always fill it in if they don't know the word. That's okay. It'll be fun. And then for kids who are talking in phrases and sentences, they'll more readily learn the rhyming pattern usually. And after a couple of times reading the book, it can be really exciting because they start to fill in one or more of the words in the rhyme, which is great. My last sort of book selection tip is when you're book sharing, be leery of books that have whole paragraphs of text. Those books can make it a little bit distracting for caregivers and make you want to read all the words on the page, and really over focus on that, which can lose the kids' attention. And when we're talking about these book sharing strategies, that makes it harder to make room for those. So just thinking about that. When we're trying to promote the book sharing interaction. I think we were going to try and leave a little bit of time for questions. So